Hello guys, this is TC Lee on behalf of the Tank Club, and this is my main tank build for veteran Kyne's Aegis. Just a quick thank you to Dex and Ollie that have supplied me with some extra information to help set up this build. So first of all, I just want to quickly go over the stats of the build. So we've got 64 points into health. We're using the Lord Mundus stone, and we're using Bewitched Sugar Skulls. Now we are a Dragon Knight Nord. The reason for this is Kyne's Aegis is a very hard hitting trial. So we have to spend a lot of time blocking, and when we spend a lot of time blocking, we need some sustainable kind of build. So for this particular trial, we're using the Dragon Knight because of the passives, which give us so much resources back with the use of Igneous Shields and our ultimate. And the choice of Nord is because of the resistances. Like I said, it's a very hard hitting trial, and the resistances are really nice to have for this particular trial. And you get the ulti gain as well from being a Nord, which helps to get our resources again from the passives. Nord DK is my personal preference, but you could use an Argonian. You could use an Imperial for some additional sustain. You could also use a Nightblade or a Sorcerer tank if you want to increase the amount of mitigation that you've got versus the sustain that you get with the Dragon Knight. So with this particular part, so we've got 3 different setups. We've got an add setup, a boss 1 and 2 setup, and a last boss setup. So on our last boss setup, which is the important one, so this is a really hard hitting fight, we have 47k health. Now this is not including the healer buffs from the Warden, where we're going to get even more max health. But for this fight you want to have between 45 and 50k health, because it's extremely high damage, especially in the execute phase. There's a lot of things going on. Just to put it into perspective, Kyne's Aegis as the main tank, you're going to be taking approximately 25 to 30 million damage over the course of the whole trial. To put that into comparison, the whole group in VSS hard mode won't even take 30 million damage, and you're taking that as an individual in Kyne's Aegis. So that just goes to show how much damage you're actually going to take. So onto the sets. So we've got our first setup, which is our adds setup, and this is for the add pulls. So we're going to be using a 5-piece Alkosh. We're going to be using 2-piece Thorvacan and a 5-piece Defiled Dragon. So we're using Alkosh to debuff everything for the damage increase for the group. You can pretty much use whatever enchantment on the front bar there. I've gone with Infused Weakening because everything again is hard hitting, so if I can proc that on some of the adds, that'll reduce the incoming damage for myself and the group. On the shield I've gone with a well-fitted shield, and that is because you are going to be doing a lot of sprinting and dodge rolling. Our staves are always going to be Infused Crusher no matter what. We're using the Lightning Staff for the add pulls to try and increase the minor vulnerability and off balance. Thorvacan we're using to debuff all the adds with Minor Maim. Now this has had a slight change with Greymoor, and there is now a potential 4-second downtime, but it is quite vital to try and get this activated on the stacks of adds to reduce the damage, because they are quite heavy hitting for the group. Defiled Dragon we're using for another group buff, so once everything's stacked, if you get hit by a melee attack, you'll get this ring around your character, which will then, as an area of effect, reduce everything inside it, their physical and spell resistance, by 1/320. So that's quite important, the Minor Fracture and the Minor Breach, so that everything could die faster, and that's what we want. So we've gone for the big pieces, the legs, the chest, the helmet are infused with Tri-Stat. Small pieces are sturdy with health enchants. And on the jewellery we're using 3 Swift with all mag recovery. Now we need the Swift jewellery so that we can get ahead of the group, so we can keep up with the group, so we can move quicker to stack all the ads quicker. There's some really big ad pulls in this trial where you've got to move things quickly, you've got to move quickly to taunt and stack, so Swift is the preferred choice. You could use infused mag recovery if you're struggling for sustain, but it shouldn't really be much of an issue. On to the second setup. So boss 1 and 2 are using a similar setup, so we've gone with Lord Warden as the monster set this time for the first 2 bosses. You don't have to use Lord Warden. You can pretty much use whichever monster set that you feel like you need. But this is to make sure if we get stuck on our front bar, we're taking a lot of damage, we should be able to maintain our maximum resistances. So I've gone with Lord Warden. We're using Yolnakrin, and then we're using Alkosh. So we're using the big pieces infused again. This time we've gone with health enchants on the big pieces and sturdy small pieces with the Tri-Stat. Now it doesn't really matter which way you do this. You could use all Tri-Stat, you could use all healthy if you really wanted to. It's up to you. It's not really that much of an issue for the first 2 bosses which way you place your enchantments. For the jewellery I would recommend going with 1 infused bracing and 2 infused mag recovery for both the first and the second boss. Like I said before, the staves are always going to be Crusher and infused. We're using a lightning staff on the first 2 bosses. A well-fit shield because we are doing quite a bit of dodge rolling with certain circumstances in the fights, and infused weakening again. You could, to increase the damage, use a charged one-handed weapon with a shot glyph. That would work perfectly for damage increase. To play it safe, you've got infused weakening, or you could use an infused absorb stamina for the sustain. On to the last setup, we've got the last boss setup now. And for this one, a little bit different. We are using the Master's one hand and shield. Now this is quite important because it's going to give us a big heal every time we use puncture, and this is very much needed on the last boss. It's very important. The infused weakening on the one hand is pretty important on this particular fight. It's preferred over trying to push damage because it's a very difficult fight to stay alive. Once again, we're going to be doing quite a bit of dodge rolling, so having a well-fitted piece will help with that. On the stave, it is a Maelstrom staff this time. You can use any staff that you want at this point because we're just using it as we're using the Masters, and we use Wall of Elements, so we're going to get a little bit of a damage increase on our elemental blockade that we're using to keep up our Crusher. We're using an Ice Staff for the last boss to play it extra safe, to play it extra tanky, so we can safely go onto our back bar and we're not going to die, because this last boss, it's extremely hard. Our next set is Ebon, and we are using Ebon on the helmet, the shoulder and the jewellery, and that is so we can use the Master's one hand and shield on the front bar. There is more information about the Master's one hand and shield. I'll link the video in the description below so you can understand more about that in more detail. We've then got Yolnakrin, and this set's fantastic for keeping us alive. Obviously, we're giving the group minor courage when we taunt, so it's another thing that's going to proc off our taunt. We get maximum health, maximum stamina, minor Aegis, which is going to be quite useful for this fight, and another health bonus. Obviously, with Eben, 3 health bonuses and extra healing taken. The jewelry we're using, the 3 infused again, with 2 mag recovery and 1 bracing. The small pieces are sturdy with the tri-stat, and the big pieces are infused health, and this is quite important this time. You could use infused tri-stat, but we do need the extra health, so if you're not quite up to 45 to 50k health, then consider placing your enchantments this way round on this fight, where you've got infused health enchants on the big pieces, because that will boost your health a little bit more. Obviously, when you use infused tri-stat, you only have 572 health, whereas when you use infused health enchant, you get 1144, so there's quite a big difference there. But you are going to lose some stamina and magicka to do this particular setup. So this is our last boss setup. On the last boss, if you are struggling to stay alive, you could switch the Eben set over to the off tank, and you could use the Jailer's set, and this one will increase your healing taken, your maximum health. You'll have more healing taken, but most importantly, when you lose 7,000 or more health from a single attack, you gain major vitality for 5 seconds, which increases your healing received by 30%. This is going to be happening quite a lot, especially on the last boss. So this is a safety set for people that are uncomfortable on the fight, people who are struggling to stay alive. You could very much use this set to help yourself stay alive. When you combine all the things together, you've got the Jailer's set, you've got your Master's One Hand and Shield. These things are all going to help you to stay alive. For the last boss, if you don't have the Master's One Hand and Shield, what you could do is use Eben, Yolnakrin and a monster set. But I would advise that you don't use the Eben weapons. They have been fixed for the person who uses Eben. So when you bar swap using Eben weapons, the person who's using the set doesn't lose the 1000 health buff, but the rest of your group does. So when you bar swap with Eben weapons, your group loses the 1000 health for a quick second, but it is still a problem if people's health is bouncing up and down. So I would advise not to use the Eben weapons, maybe use Yolnakrin jewelry and weapons, and then use the Eben body pieces. And then you can use a monster set with that setup as well to make things a little bit easier. So you have a choice of monster sets in this trial. You don't have to use Lord Warden. You could use Earthgore if you would like something to heal you. It's quite a good heal. It's spread out over 10 seconds. It's a 20-second cooldown, so it's basically got a 50% uptime as long as you reach the requirements to proc it. Lord Warden obviously for the armor buff, if you'd like more resistances. You can use Sentinel of Rakugam, which you will proc using your Overflowing Altar, and that will give more healing and resources to your group and sometimes yourself as well. If you're really struggling for sustain, you can use Stonekeeper. This set has had quite a considerable downgrade with the Greymoor DLC. So now, while you can build up the stacks quicker every 0.25 seconds, the amount of resources you gain is very low. And it's still got quite a long downtime, which isn't particularly great in certain situations. If you have any stamina DDs in your group, you will need to run Tremor Scale, at least for the first 2 bosses. So when you taunt an enemy, you cause the Dune Ripper to burst out the ground. And that will also reduce physical resistance by 2,395 for 8 seconds. It can occur every 8 seconds. It can have a 100% uptime. In a similar way to Elkosh, it's a unique buff, so it's very much needed for any groups with stamina DDs, and this is because stamina DDs can remove 36 champion points out of their blue CP in piercing and apply it elsewhere to increase more damage. Another healing monster that you could use is Troll King. It gives almost 1,000 health recovery, and this will pretty much stay active 100% of the fight on the last boss. When you apply it with various other sources, including Bewitched Sugar Skulls, your Major Fortitude, and potentially the Steed Mundus Stone, you are going to get quite a considerable amount of health recovery. Finally, you could use Vycosa. So Vycosa is quite a good set because you can debuff the enemy with a bash. So as long as you've got the enemy taunted and you bash the enemy, you can reduce their weapon and spell damage by 20%. So that's going to reduce the amount of damage that you're taking, which is obviously very good. The traits in this fight, you can use Sturdy because we are blocking a lot. Because we're having to block most of the fight, the enemies are hitting very quickly for a lot of damage. So it's very difficult to drop your block. If you are dodge rolling a lot, feel free to switch some of the Sturdy pieces over to Well Fitted, because that will also work absolutely perfectly. But that's up to you. Onto the skills. So, skills on the ads, as you can see here, we are using Ransack because it gives us the minor protection. That's going to be a vital thing to consider for this fight. We've then got Heroic Slash, and that's going to help us to debuff the enemy, debuff the bosses, and help build Ultimate. Igneous Shield, it's going to give us an 8,800 shield. Now that's going to really help with our ability to stay alive. We're also going to be using this a lot for our sustain and our major mending. So every time we use this, we're going to gain 990 stamina, which is going to be vital because this is quite a high blocking trial where we're having to block a lot and it's very risky to bar swap. So this is going to be very good for us. Green Dragon Blood. So we're going to use this at a point where we're at low health and we need an emergency heal. This works best when it's an emergency. And we get more heals from that when we do that. If you also use Igneous Shield before you use Green Dragon Blood, you'll get an even bigger heal because of the major mending. We're using Defensive Stance. The amount of damage we can block is increased by 10%. And our cost of blocking is reduced by 10% as well. So that's quite helpful. Ultimate, we're using Barrier, and this is only for the Magicka recovery and the passives. So we'll go over that in just a minute. On the back bar, for the trash, so for the ad pulls, Inner Rage for our range taunt and guaranteed synergy. We're using charging maneuvers to give ourselves and the group a speed boost. Blockade of Storms with Lightning Staff to help push off balance and minor vulnerability. Balance for our major resolve and for sustain on our Magicka. And I'm using Unrelenting Grip because we need that to chain in the small ads. Aggressive Warhorn, it's the only ultimate we're going to use throughout this trial for our group to buff the group with the major force and increase our max stats on the magic and stamina. So that's the ad pulls. First and second boss, more or less the same. So we're using the same front bar. On the back bar, we're going to throw Overflowing Altar on there instead of the speed boost. We don't need charger maneuvers while we're fighting bosses. So we just go with the Overflowing Altar to help our group stay alive. We've got balance there. However, you could use Hardened Armor. I wouldn't usually advise that people use Hardened Armor, but in this particular situation where you're getting taking so many hits and you get hit by so much damage, it would probably be considerably easier to use that instead, because Obviously balance, it costs health to cast, and you've got a 4-second healing debuff once you cast it. So it can be a little bit risky in this fight to use balance. So hardened armor, if you want to play extra safe and you're not comfortable with adding additional damage on top of the already high damage that you're taking. This is a flex spot where you've got unrelenting grip. I like to use it for the major expedition because we are moving around the room quite a lot on the first boss. On the second boss, it's kind of up to you what skill you put here. There's no right or wrong answer. You could slot efficient purge here on the first boss because there is a poison circle that you get around your feet that can be purged. So you could use efficient purge there if you need to. You could also use Stone Giant in this particular flex spot if you are comfortable with using it and the stamina cost to increase your group's damage even further. So you'll increase your damage of your group by quite a lot by using Stone Giant. But it is quite risky as the main tank in this trial to use it. Last boss setup, slightly different. There's only a slight difference, but we are definitely going to use. We are definitely dropping balance on this fight because, as I mentioned before, we're taking 30 million damage over the course of this trial, and this is the most hard-hitting fight. This is where the majority of the damage is taken, so we're dropping balance for this fight. It's a flex spot here again, but I've popped it immovable there, so you don't necessarily need hardened armor if you're using a movable, but when there's heavy hitting mechanics coming up, you can choose to use this. It does cost stamina, which is the downfall. It's not something you can reliably keep up with the stamina cost. So hardened armor costs magicka. It makes sense to use that unless there's a heavy hitting mechanic that's coming up and you could use a movable, and that's going to increase the amount of damage we can block by 5% for each piece of heavy armor that we're using. And this is very much a still fight where we're not moving much around the room, so you could use 7 heavy because we haven't got to go anywhere. We don't really need to do anything, so you could use 7 heavy and use this. You won't be able to move, you won't be able to dodge roll for a very short period of time, but you will get a massive decrease in damage that you're taking. Quickly go over some of the passive skills. So Ardent Flame isn't really important. None of these are any use to us in Kyne's Aegis, so you don't need to put any points into anything in Ardent Flame. Draconic Power. So we need the points in Iron Skin, Burning Heart, Elder Dragon, and Scaled Armor. They're all extremely important passives that we're going to make use of. Earthen Heart increases the duration of Earthen Heart abilities. This is very important, so we could be using, when we're using Igneous Shields, we're increasing the duration that our shield lasts for. Battle Roar passive. This is the reason why the Dragon Knight is so good for sustain. So we're going to be using our Warhorn as much as we can. And every time we use it, we're going to get resources back. And the resources are based off the cost of the ultimate. Now for us it's 250 ultimate, so we're going to gain pretty much all of our resources back every single time we use a Warhorn. The Mountain's Blessing. So this is what we're using to generate ultimate. So we're using our Igneous Shield again, and when we use Igneous Shield and we're in combat, we generate 3 ultimate. Helping Hand passive, and this is a gain for our Igneous Shield. When we use Igneous Shield, we're going to gain back 990 stamina through this passive, which is going to help us with our sustain, especially because we're going to be blocking a lot. We want all the passives in our one hand and shield. Everything here is absolutely vital. There's not really much need for explanation, but everything is going to be needed there. Destruction Staff. We don't want to use the Trifocus passive because we are using a Frost Staff, and we don't want to use our Frost Staff to be blocking with magicka. We want to use it we want to still block with stamina because we want our mag recovery so that we can use igneous shields to gain our stamina back. That's the way we're going about doing this. You don't particularly need any of these passives other than Ancient Knowledge, where we're going to get the reduced cost to block with the Frost Staff and increasing the amount of damage we can block by 20% when we're using the Ice Staff. So on the last boss, very important. We are going to be using possibly a light shoulder for some fights, so it's nice to get the first 3 passives. Grace is going to be pretty important, reducing the cost of sprint, snares, increased mag recovery, reducing the magicka cost, and a little bit more spell resistance. Medium armor again, you can always take the first 3 passives anyway. You might choose to use a medium shoulder piece instead of a light, and that's fine also. Heavy armor, we're using all of the passives here again because we're using 5 pieces of heavy, so these are absolutely vital. Mage's Guild, if you are using balance, then you'll want to take the 3 middle passives, reduce the magicka and health cost, increases the duration, and increase the max magicka and mag recovery. So, Undaunted passives, you do want to take these because we need the extra maximum resources, and we also need the increase of incoming resources from synergies, which is going to be very helpful for our sustain. Support passives, because we might use Efficient Purge on the first boss, and because we're using Barrier. The only reason we're using Barrier is to get the 10% magicka recovery from this passive. That's the only reason we use Barrier. And then obviously the Nord passives, we need all of those. Especially this one that's going to give us the ultimate, the max stamina, and this one which is going to give us the increase in resistances. The final passive we need is Medicinal Use, and this is just so we can get more of a benefit out of our potions. That's all the abilities. So on to the champion points. Now these aren't set in stone, basically. We've still got some things to look at, but this is my suggested setup for release day for now, for Kyne's Aegis. So we've got 37 in Warlord, and this is because there are certain situations, especially on the second boss, where you have to break free, and that can be quite a high stamina cost. We don't want to waste a lot of stamina breaking free, so we've got 37 points there. We've got 64 in Arcanist for the extra magic recovery, 37 in Tenacity, so we can try and generate some resources when we get the chance with the heavy attacks. 51 in Tumbling, because we are going to be dodge rolling to try and avoid some of the damage, because we can't just take all the damage, we have got to try and avoid some of it. Got 81 into Shadow Ward, because we are blocking a lot in this trial. You're having to block a lot. Blue CP, so I've got 66 Blessed and 51 Elfborn. This is mainly because Green Dragon Blood is a magicka heal, and we do want to have some kind of healing boost. Blessed is also increasing the heal that we do with our Master's One Hand and Shield. 3 points that were left over just gone there. I've got 30 points into this, into the Atronach for the Riposte passive. And then we've got 120 points into the Ritual, so we can get the Last Stand passive as well. It doesn't really matter too much how you distribute these, but I've gone with 72 Precise Strikes, 28 Thaumaturge, 1 Piercing, 19 Mighty. Red Champion points. So we've gone with 81 in Ironclad because you're taking a lot of direct damage in this trial, a lot of heavy attacks from the bosses, a lot of light attacks that hit very hard. We're using 64 Hardy again because of the physical damage. There is quite a bit of poison damage in this trial as well. We're going for 66 Thick Skinned to reduce damage from damage over time effects. 56 in Elemental Defender. And then the 3 leftover points have just gone into Heavy Armor Focus. This isn't a red CP that's set in stone for the tanks. This might change over the course of the next week or two. For more updates on the CP, keep an eye on the Tank Club Discord. That's where I'll post any updates to the champion points, should there be any. So thank you for watching this video for my main tank build for Kyne's Aegis. If you've got any questions about the build or any suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below. For more builds, tank information, make sure you check out my Discord, the Tank Club. The information for that is also in the description below. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.